But it's not the same when it comes to local football. Once you're in it, it's because you really like the game and you're willing to part money with it to help the system in your club system work at the singular club, or even in the and even maybe even fund a bit for sponsorship and profile for Singapore football, and also building political and business interests on the side as a result of it. But a few factors are really missing. That is why your Peter Lim is not going to be investing in it soon, and he's not also going to be interested like Madden Pang or even TMJ and Erick Thohir to try to revive the PSSI, simply because I suspect he's not as interested. Well, after Singapore's advancement into the semi-finals of the ASEAN Championship, it is quite heartening to find out that support for the Singapore national team has reached at a certain level not seen since actually perhaps maybe the 2005 final with the second leg held at the Jalan Besar Stadium, or maybe even the early 90s. I may be exaggerating, or actually more recently in 2012, the edition of the ASEAN Championship, which was also known as the AFM Suzuki Cup. They actually had a lot of Singaporeans queuing up overnight to buy the home legs of the semi-final tickets for semi-final against the Philippines, the second leg, and also the first leg of the final against Thailand, both of which were held at Jalan Besar Stadium, which is also the same venue in which the first leg of the semi-final between Singapore and Vietnam will be held on Boxing Day, 26th of December, this Thursday. And actually it is heartening to know that even though all the available tickets in the 6,000 capacity Jalan Besar Stadium, 5,700, because the other remaining 300 are going to be given to Vietnam fans through the Vietnamese Football Federation. It is pleasing to know that within a few hours, all the 5,700 tickets were snapped up, including a reward for those who actually queued up early on Sunday morning, or even overnight on Saturday. So you can say that football fever is actually alive, especially when Singapore does well to advance into the semi-finals of a regional competition, and especially with the format where you are going to have a home leg in Singapore. I think this is an opportunity for the locals to catch on to the football fever while it lasts, like how it has for the previous couple of times. But moving ahead a bit, it's also more heartening, I think, for the first time ever in the history of the ASEAN Championship, or previously known as the AFF Championship since its induction in 1996, that for the first time ever, 11 community centers in Singapore are going to broadcast at least the first leg live. It's spread in different parts of Singapore, in the east, in the west, and in the north. So there are plenty of opportunities for Singaporeans or the residents of Singapore who want to soak into the upward momentum in Singapore local football mood to enjoy the festivities, even though they cannot be physically there at the Jalan Besar Stadium. And just to clarify, why do we hold this semi-final at Jalan Besar Stadium even though we had a 55,000 capacity national stadium at the Singapore Sports Hub? Frankly, it's mainly down to this is not the fault of the Football Association of Singapore. This is also not the fault of the management of Sports Hub, because in this period the setups and the rehearsals are underway for local born mental pop star JJ Lin's or Lim Junjie first stop of his 2024-25 World Tour concert, and he has chosen this venue, his home country, to kick off this tour. So, and these dates were already booked months before, and prior to that, the Football Association of Singapore, in believing the previous schedule of this ASEAN Championship, had booked the other slots prior to it. However, the rather last minute changes in fixture scheduling, especially after the protest by the member associations of the ASEAN Football Federation, had led to a rethink by the organizers, and it has led to the Regional Football Confederation moving the dates backwards to where we are now. So as a result, you actually simply cannot just move the JJ Lin concert just like that. It's not his fault. It is not the Football Association of Singapore's fault. It's not Sports Singapore's fault. Ultimately, the ASEAN Football Federation can do a lot better when it comes to scheduling the dates, especially in a very cramped international football calendar. And I'm not talking about your elite nations like your England, Brazil, Argentina, or even your Japan. But even for Southeast Asia, we are getting quite a bit of football these days, and especially the further a nation goes in the qualification tournament, especially the World Cup or in the final rounds of the Asian Cup, there'll be at least a year where there will be so many fixtures coming in, and that's where the ASEAN Championship takes a back seat for a number of countries. But I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to focus more about Singapore, the current upward turn of fortunes, and also you can say rather mysterious absentee or rather non-player so far. And now, still on the ASEAN Championships, it is very heartening that our local community that the Singaporean community centers have taken a step forward to broadcast this regional championships semi-finals live on those various community centers, on the big screens with the advanced technology that they have. It is not an issue for them to host it, given that they have done so previously when it comes to the World Cups, when it comes to the European Championships. They have no difficulty. This is easy for the community centers, and you can expect at least more than 1,000 cramming into all these areas just to catch a glimpse of the Lions taking on the visiting Vietnamese in action. And also in the midst of it, where people had queued overnight to buy tickets, which is more of a rarity these days, but it's an encouraging sign. However, in the midst of all that brouhaha, actually we have to look a bit further. I think this has to do with recent regional developments in Southeast Asia, where your big players of the game have been more involved recently in their domestic and national football associations, where right now your current big players are also the most influential decision makers and personalities in Southeast Asian football these days. The Tunku Mahkota of Johor, who is also currently the region of Johor, Tunku Ismail Idris, who owns Johor Darul Takzim and was once the president of the Football Association of Singapore in the past decade. Erick Thohir, the current PSSI chairman, president, and one-time owner of Inter Milan. Madam Pang, the current Thai FA president, and also the owner of Port FC, the heiress of a $1 billion industry in insurance. They have been very active, not just in pumping money, pumping effort into helping their local club and football as on a wider scale grow to increase the visibility and popularity of the game, and also gain a better standing as a result of their influence beyond Southeast Asia, at least in Asia, and also even to an extent in the world. And that's where Singaporean billionaire Peter Lim, who is the current owner of the Spanish struggling side, La Liga side, Valencia, he has been very quiet. And actually, to be fair to him, he never has had any track record in Singapore club football or Singapore football as a whole. And I did mention in an early episode of Tidak that Peter Lim was actually once approached by one of the contesting teams in the 2017 Football Association of Singapore Council elections to see whether he can be involved. While he listened and ultimately declined, I do believe that there is an interest, but he needs that right space and the right opportunity. However, in contrast, while Peter Lim has remains in situ and focuses on Valencia right now, having recently given up his share at Salford City, one of his former colleagues, or rather, you can say one of the Singaporean key official at the Spanish club. He is now at Burnley FC. Sean Bai, a former diplomat, he was also at one time, very recently, the general manager of Singapore Premier League side Geylang International. And right now, he has used his contacts and expertise in the game to be involved as, I think you can say, the director of operations at English Championship side Burnley. At least Sean Bai has used his Valencia experience, which has served him well both in Singaporean football and now in English football. And what about Peter Lim in this case? Ultimately, where Singaporean billionaire Peter Lim is concerned, he was not the king of reminders for nothing. He's more about, I think, primarily about making money and making the best out of the position of the club. However much, in this case, the Valencia fans are hating him and they want Peter Lim, Chan Lei Hoon and the Singaporean board to step down from their beloved club. But Peter Lim sees Valencia CF as an opportunity for him to keep his profile in the wider European game as a club owner. And his methods so far have actually evolved after a promising start in his reign. Right now it's more towards survival and making the club as profitable as possible. And unfortunately, I think the finances involved in running such a football club or any of the top 5 leagues football club is massive. This is not running a local club in Singapore where you just only need, say, at most every year 10 million, just a 10 million, which is probably a drop in the sky for billionaires like him, for the mega rich. 10 million a year is nothing for Peter Lim, but if he's looking at profit and sustainability, that's where he finds himself in a spot. And the thing is, Valencia, in spite of its recent predicaments in the past few seasons in the Spanish top flight, remains one of the more storied clubs in Spain after the El Clasico duo of Real Madrid and Barcelona. And it has a rather rich history as recently as in the early 2000s, where they were briefly dominant under former manager Rafael Benitez. And I think what Peter Lim wants is probably he needs Valencia CF as probably this is my educated guess, as a club to hold on to for now, for status, and hopefully find an owner who is willing to buy the Andalusian club for profit. And that currently is a bit easier said than done, because if Valencia somehow gets relegated from La Liga at the end of the 24-25 season, the market value of the club will plummet considerably. And the thing is, I think while not every billionaire, every mega rich family in Singapore is interested in Singapore football, I understand, because this is mainly about, you can say, everybody wants to make money and all that. But there are a few billionaires who have been involved in the Singapore football, especially since the professional era began in 1996. Ong Beng Sing is actually one of them. Indirectly though, with Teo Hock Seng, the current Football Association of Singapore Vice President, as the front man when Teo was in charge of Tampines Rovers for more than a decade in the early 2000s to 2010s. Then you also have, I think, a number of other rich men early on in the professional era. Tang Wan Fei, who is a multi-millionaire and still has businesses in Hong Kong and Indonesia. He is semi-retired, but he still takes an interest in the grassroots football at Woodlands, particularly in the annual year-end school holiday football festival, which is named in his honor. Forrest Lee, obviously, the man behind C Private Limited, which involves of Garena and particularly right now its flagship product or brand Shopee, and is listed in the New York Stock Exchange. He was a former council member in the Football Association between 2017 and 2021. He remains the owner of Lion City Sailors since he bought it over in 2020, and is a newly elected member of the Singapore National Olympic Council Executive Committee. By keeping his profile in Singapore sport and retaining his interests at the Lion City Sailors with a proper training and administrative facility at Mata Road, he at least put his hand where his mouth was, and to actually build a committed facility where players can train in their own, instead of trying to run from a different stadium to another field in the hope of finding a proper training ground for them to train. At least they have a dedicated training facility. At least the staff they have an office where they can work on, instead of renting from stadiums or even in nearby office buildings where office rental can be at a premium, especially given the inflation situation in Singapore. But it's not. But then again, rich men have been involved in Singapore football. Rich millionaires. Sometimes, never directly, but sometimes there are those who are rich enough to fork it out from their own pockets. People like Patrick Ang, who is still involved in the Singapore branch of Taiwanese major airline EVA Air. You have, and who has links with Peter Lim. Yes, Patrick Ang somehow has links with Peter Lim, but it's not a very strong one. And Mr. Ang has no association with the big Singaporean billionaire at Valencia or other ventures. And the thing is, investing in a Singaporean football club is actually quite easy for those billionaires. There are even tax cuts and exempts in accordance with the local tax regulations, where I think they can get a certain amount of returns for the amount that they have invested, especially if a club is not a private limited or limited liability partnership. But the problem is, right now, Sailors have made a little headway when it comes to marketing their product, marketing their club brand, and I think when you have advanced ticketing system and You provide match jerseys, you provide the branding, you provide visibility on social media, but other local clubs not so. And so even when if billionaires want to invest in a local club, they do want a return of investment, even if it's at a small loss. But the thing is, sometimes they do want to break at least more than break even to make the club profitable. But football clubs throughout the world originally start as a platform for communities to play together, whether it's the racial communities or your sectarians or the sectarian side of it, or even your unions or the various factories and all this. But still, yes, it exists for a community for them to play the game. And if you are looking at profit, it's not easy. It's extremely challenging in Singapore, where you can see for many of the clubs, ticket sales are very negligible, still negligible to this day, and it has been for a while, where funding, where they are kept alive by the funding, and you can say the life support system from the Singapore totalitarian board, but it's decreasing. Then you still have a bit of funding from Sport Singapore, although it's not a lot. And even the Football Association of Singapore has a very small budget, modest budget of less than 20 million annually compared to the rest of Southeast Asia. Yes, I know, it's a bit unbelievable, but it's true. Singapore is one of the poorest football associations in Southeast Asia, never mind the world. I think you can see where the economic priorities lie, and football, while it's very popular and people still watch the big European leagues, the World Cups, the major international tournaments, but when it comes to investing in local football, there are a lot of challenges, because you have the issue of stadium ownership. Even buying a stadium is not a trivial issue when it comes to drumming up support, because now families are more concerned about academic achievements. It's not about the racial thing about the Chinese being focused on studies. Even the Malays, the Indians join the Chinese and the Eurasians and other racial communities in the focus on studies, because if you do not have a certificate or diploma, never mind a degree, it's going to be difficult. And there are more footballers who have diplomas these days, and then your salaries, which is actually quite low. I mean, in Talking Point special edition on Singapore football, is like even Tampines Rovers, who are one of the higher paid, who pay their clubs in a higher salary than the average. The range for the local players per month is between 2,500 to 7,000. Yes, sailors easily double that, but even then, if they're talking about return of investment, it's unfortunately negligible, and they're doing it partially for different agendas. Maybe it's to build future business connections and all that. Peter Lim, while he has an interest, there are also a few obstacles if he ever wants to really invest. He can have his own property in Singapore, but trying to buy over a stadium, it's possible, but at a cost. But there are a lot of administrative obstacles to overcome, and that could set anyone who tries to buy over a local stadium, I'm going to pardon English, it will drive people nuts, those who want to try to buy a stadium or even rent a stadium, because the thing is, ultimately the authorities do want to share a little share of the profits. I put it mildly there. And there are also other things. How about getting the players? You can get, and the population is very small. In a modest size stadium, some of them which is still on the 1980s, they were on the concrete and or slabs and all these things, and there are increasingly more and more artificial fields. How about getting a training ground where land use is actually quite limited and is actually dependent on the Urban Redevelopment Authority, which determine the use of the land which is already pre-planned more than a decade ago. So it's not easy to just shift based on, like, I want a mid-size stadium of 20,000 so that you can have a football game there in case you don't want to hold it at the National Stadium, which is very expensive, which costs $1 billion to build. But it's still a challenge because there are a lot of other things. Do you want to have a 20,000 Cedar Stadium that hosts only the ASEAN Championships, but the big part is it going to be used regularly? That is not so straightforward. Is it going to be a profit-making thing? Very hard to tell if the public-private partnership is anything to go by. And that's where I think even if Peter Lim is very interested in funding Singapore football or even take a Singapore football club first, he does have the connections with York Manders and all that, but the ground realities and also the prospect that he's going to burn money in investing in the Singapore club first, whether it's even if it's 10 million, without getting even 1 million back, it's going to be a massive challenge. You may get silverware, you may even conquer Asia, but do those businessmen like Peter Lim, are they willing to part money like this in a way that foolishly? I think that's where the harsh reality is. You have to put the money where your mouth is. You have to walk the talk, and you have to be mentally ready to accept that you're not going to get anything back from that money that you give to the football club in Singapore, even as a professional entity. That's why salaries are not always that high. That's why even at the youth level, the young players earn less playing football in their age groups than working as a fast food helper or even as a delivery person. So, and players even moonlight because they need a second job as property agents or in other occupations just to feed families. So it's never an easy situation where when you ask for your billionaires to fund the money, I think he certainly does not want his own countrymen to start uttering the same nonsense that the Valencia fans have been chanting, because Valencia is a personal, private, maybe investment in a way, but I think he also understands that the last thing you need is unwanted attention because of failures in Singapore football that's linked to him. He can take probably the heat from the Valencia fans because he's a bit, you can say, emotionally detached from Valencia, but it's not the same when it comes to local football. Once you're in it, it's because you really like the game and you're willing to part money with it to help the system in your club system work at the singular club, or even maybe even fund a bit for sponsorship and profile for Singapore football, and also building political and business interests on the side as a result of it. But a few factors are really missing. That is why your Peter Lim is not going to be investing in it soon, and he's not also going to be interested like Madam Pang or even TMJ and Erick Thohir to try to revive the PSSI, simply because I suspect he's not as interested as we might think, or even some local football fans, hardcore football fans may want.